toast an in-principle deal between the world's two largest beer makers today, Anheuser-Busch Inbev and SABMiller. But the long walk to a global mega brewer has only just begun. Competition authorities in various parts of the world, including here in South Africa, will have to give the merger the green light before it's a fully done deal. These are some of the beers produced by the two companies. Once combined, AB InBev and SABMiller will control about a third of the global beer market. SABMiller, now seen as a British company, its main listing in London, despite SAB's long history here in South Africa. Still, Labour has raised concern about job cuts here as beer operations are streamlined or closed. When Anheuser-Busch was purchased by InBev in 2008, it cut staff by up to 15% at some of its locations. And an analyst in London now predicts that the South African government will definitely push back. Well, let's chat to that analyst now. We're joined on the line by Peter Montalto from Nomura. Peter, great to have you with us. Government pushed back when Walmart wanted to buy Massmart. Are some of the same sorts of concerns likely to be raised?
Hi, good evening. Well, I think the really interesting thing about this deal, from the perspective of South Africa, is there's actually very little domestic competition issues around the sort of similar products and stuff like that. InBev does not have a massive footprint within South Africa, and it's really about the wider public interest role that the Competition Commission plays within South Africa of protecting jobs, preventing offshoring and downsizing, issues around ownership and preserving ownership and the history of ownership in South Africa. All these things are what's of interest, I think, to government, but it's not really a simple competition issue. But under the legislation, the Competition Commission can look at those public interest issues.
And job losses are likely to be a concern. We know that previously when beer companies merged, there has been quite significant job cuts. Anheuser-Busch cost cutting, apparently execs fly economy class. Do you think that will be a big issue?
Well, as I said, I don't think there's that huge amount of overlap with South Africa in terms of InBev, and there's a much stronger footprint in the wider Africa market for SABMiller. But the really interesting thing, I think, is that potential for offshoring certain jobs, bottling in particular. And I think it's not clear at all yet of what the plans of InBev are on that front. And that's maybe what the South African government, through the Competition Commission, will look to extract. Are jobs, numbers, guarantees, no upfront job losses, or you'll happen through attrition over time. That's sort of what we saw through previous cases that have gone through the Competition Commission. And also local content as well is very important. That was, of course, one of the key sticking points around Massmart Walmart was the local content issue.
What about tax implications? And of course, there's also this complicated partial share offer. You've said it may cause problems on the JSE. Just explain those two issues.
Well, the tax issue is very interesting because National Treasury in the past has never really stuck its head above the parapet on these FDI deals. They want to appear very investor-friendly, and they are still compared to a lot of the rest of government. But they've made some interesting comments more recently about the tax implications of this deal that we're watching very closely. I think they're very keen to avoid tax savings for InBev, of a reduction in the revenue paid to South Africa. I suppose that parallels a little bit the ownership issue around the JSE, but it's interesting that National Treasury are looking at this actually more closely maybe than they have done in the past. And I think that shows the political sensitivity of the deal overall. The dual listing issue in the JSE is a lot more complicated. There is a whole raft of legislation that's been changing a lot. In general, the government has tried to promote dual listings, and we should remember that actually only around 8% of South Africans of the shares of SABMiller were actually ever traded on the JSE. Only 4.5% were held by South Africans. But even so, that notional ownership, and given the history of the company, was very, very important. So it's going to be interesting to watch how the SAB, under exchange controls, you can sort of get involved in this as well through the JSE.
Peter, finally, and very quickly, we're going to bring up that graph again that shows SABMiller and AB's operations around the world. Now, this could be a global monopoly in a sense, but they are also complementary. They keep on saying they're complementary. Will this pass through the various competition authorities? Will it work given the two cultures?
Well, the view very much of our in-house beverage equity analyst experts is that InBev always does their homework, that they are very attuned to the risks of process going on around this, particularly for such a big deal. And I think the view very much is that this sort of thing can delay the closure of any deal, but probably can't derail it. I think that's true of the Competition Commission in South Africa as well. There is a lot of potential for extraction of conditionality of agreements, but actually blocking the deal, I think, is going to be very difficult in South Africa and globally as well. So it's more a timing issue.
All right, thank you very much, Peter Montalto from Numero in London.